Hello everyone, this is Tom at VoIP Supply, and thank you for attending our Grandstream webinar today. We're going to talk a little bit about the GXP IP Phone series with a security overview to give you some more info on security features of those phones. In our agenda today, you can see, I'm just going to give you a brief overview initially, who VoIP Supply is, what we do, and how we can benefit you. A bit of our product portfolio. We'll go into system and network security, data protection and encryption, secure VoIP services, device and peripheral control, and Abdel from Grandstream, who is on the webinar here and will lead most of those topics. We'll also do a live demo. And then we'll have time for any questions and answers. And throughout the webinar, if you do have questions, feel free to put them into our IM chat feature, and we'll be happy to address those throughout, or like it says here at the very end. So again, my name's Tom Uhteg, company VoIP Supply, partnered with Grandstream. We have some of our reseller benefits here listed for you as far as our rental program. We do have hardware and provisioning services for any IP devices you might purchase through us, whether it's a phone, PBX, gateway, anything that you might need assistance with, or just to maybe get something pre-provisioned and blind shipped off to a customer so it's ready to go on site when you're going to show up and do an install. Also have a cloud spam marketplace where we can introduce you to various VoIP service providers that we are directly aligned with, fulfillment services, and our refresh and reclaim program where you can get some really good A-stock quality refurbished phones that come with a 6-month warranty direct through VoIP Supply. And then we have our reseller portal here that you can see. Real nifty tool. You can log in, get any info you're looking for on your account, view quotes that we have activated. If I basically make a quote I activated in the system, you can order direct through there. You can get your partner pricing, any marketing materials, downloadable content that you could send to your customers to maybe explain a little bit more about VoIP and the different hardware that goes into the VoIP solution infrastructure. The reseller advantage, as a partner, you do have the ability to resell service from providers that we are directly aligned with, such as BroadVoice, Tetra VX, Star, and the others you can see listed there, where you can earn residuals, additional equipment discounts, and you have our expert sales team here. A solution consultant like myself or any other member of my team that'd be able to directly assist you, answer calls, emails, and anything else you may need from us. Well, again, if you want to become a VoIP Supply partner, you can contact me directly. If you have any further questions, concerns, any other information you would want, my name's Tom Uhteg. There's my phone number and email right there. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'll be more than happy to assist you in your needs. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Abdel from Grandstream, who's going to lead us through the majority of this webinar here.
All right, thanks, Tom, and thanks everyone for being here with us in this webinar. My name is Abdel Jabbar from the Grandstream support here in Boston. So before we dive into the security settings and features available on the GXP phones, I would like to quickly refresh everyone of the GXP models currently manufactured and supported by Grandstream. These models are designed to primarily serve the small and medium business and enterprise markets. First, we have the GXP2100 series with color LCD screen. It comes with multiple line support and advanced telephony features like Bluetooth, PoE, LDAP integration, HD audio, and EHS capability for headsets that support this feature. All GXP2100 models come with the dual switch gigabit ports to provide users with the fastest possible connection speeds. So the first model that we have in the list is the 2160. It comes with the 6 lines, 5-way audio conferencing, and 24 physical MPKs. Then we have the 2140. It supports 4 lines, 5-way conference, and you can connect up to 4 expansion module to the 2140. Then we have the model 2130, which comes with 3 SIP accounts and 3 lines. It supports 4-way conferencing, and it has 8 physical MPKs. Next, we have the new generation of the GXP2100 series, which include the GXP2135 and the GXP2170. The 2170 supports 6 SIP accounts and 12 lines and 48 on-screen virtual MPKs for speed dial, BLF, and intercom, and all the other MPK modes. And it has the option to connect 4 expansion modules with a total of 160 digital MPKs. This makes the GXP2170 an ideal solution for busy users who handle high volume or high call volumes. And then we have the GXP2135. This one supports 4 SIP accounts with 8 lines and 8-way conference, and it supports 24 virtual MPKs. Then we have the mid-range GXP1700 series, which is designed with advanced telephony features like the ones included in the GXP2100. The major difference, though, is that GXP1700 models do not come with the color LCD and do not have Bluetooth capability. So in terms of the models in this family, we have the GXP1782. It supports 4 SIP accounts with 8 lines. And when I say 8 lines, I mean 8 concurrent calls at the same time. And it supports 5-way audio conferencing, and you can use the line keys to configure them with 32 virtual on-screen MPKs. They support the EHS capability, all the models. And next we have the GXP1760. This one supports 6 lines, 5-way conferencing, and 24 virtual MPKs. And we have the GXP1760W, which is the only model of the desk phone, that supports Wi-Fi. So this one is dual band Wi-Fi. It supports 6 lines with 5-way conferencing and 24 virtual MPKs. All of these models are PoE enabled, and also they provide you with HD audio using the codecs that are used for the HD audio. Then the last family of the GXP series are the basic IP phones, GXP1600 series, which are a perfect solution for those who handle low to medium call volume and require access to key call functionalities. So the first model that we have is the 1630. This one comes with 3 lines and 4 audio conferencing, and it comes with the 8 physical MPKs. Then we have the 1628, 2 lines and 8 physical MPKs. And then we have the 1625, 2 lines with 3-way conferencing. And we have the 1615, which supports 1 SIP account and 2 lines with 3-way conferencing. And I just want to add this, so all of our IP phones are compatible with any third-party SIP platform. And when you use the GXP phones with the Grandstream IP PBX, the UCM 6000, you basically take full advantage of all the features available on the phone. So going back to the slides, the first security feature that I would like to highlight is the system security that guarantees that only authentic, signed, and untampered firmware file can run on the IP phone. This makes it impossible to install a modified or unauthorized firmware using the official upgrade mechanism. And the importance of this feature lies in the fact that it eliminates the potential security threat during the, I would say, the transport or the firmware loading phases when a new firmware is downloaded via an untrusted communication channel like the internet. Also, this protects the phones against break-in when the uploaded firmware is corrupted. The GXP phones have also the capability to work in an environment where the standard 802.1x is being used. For those of you who are not familiar with this standard, 802.1x provides authentication for devices that are trying to connect to the switch ports in your network. This is a security application usually implemented in enterprise networks where endpoint devices need to go through an authentication challenge response before the device is granted access to the network. This scenario requires an authentication server like a Radius server. And just to briefly explain how it works, so with a switch that supports this capability, when it detects that an IP phone is trying to connect, the switch will challenge the IP phone for authentication, and the phone basically responds with the pre-configured username and password hashed with MD5 using the protocol that they call EPOL, or simply EAP over LAN. Then the switch will pass that information to the authentication server like a Radius server. If the supplied identity is correct, then the authentication server will respond with the success message to tell the switch to allow the IP phone to connect and start forwarding data. So this is one of the features that are like highly secure. They protect your network from people coming into your switch and just plug in their devices and start like running captures on the wire so that they can capture the other devices. So this is highly recommended in case you want to use it. And in case it is already used, the GXP 2100, all the models, they fit into that scenario. And another network security feature is available on the GXP phones is the VPN capability. This capability allows the GXP phones to be deployed remotely without the concern of privacy breach or eavesdropping. The VPN standard supported on the GXP phones is OpenVPN, which is a robust open source solution with many security advantages, especially when it comes to the cipher suite used to encrypt and decrypt the communicated data. The OpenVPN is easy to configure on the GXP phones. You just need to get the certificates from the OpenVPN server and upload them to the phone. And if you want to add more security to the OpenVPN tunnel, you can set up the OpenVPN username and password. And during the live demo, I will show you the settings that you need to modify to allow the GXP phone to remotely connect and register to the IPPBX behind the OpenVPN server. In terms of data protection, the first security recommendation is always change the password, the default password. If you notice this on the latest versions of the GXP phones, now you will be prompted to change the default password to a different complex hard to guess password. And by default, we use an HTTP. So in case you're trying to access the phones remotely, it is recommended to use HTTPS because of the encryption that is provided with HTTPS. You can also change the ports by default 80 for HTTP and 443 for HTTPS. It's always recommended to change these ports so that only people who know the assigned port will be able to get access to the login page of the phone. There's also the option for SSH. I strongly recommend to leave that one disabled all the time unless you are doing some troubleshooting using SSH and you want to enable it. That's the only time where I suggest you set the SSH to yes. Then you have some options like the lockout duration and the attempt limits. So the example that we have in front of us, if someone tries to log in to the web interface of the GXP phone 5 times within 5 minutes and they fail to log in within that time, the GXP phone will lock that person for 5 minutes. These values, you can adjust them, and this is something that we're going to see during the live demo. Another option for data protection is secure provisioning. So we support the TFTP, HTTP, and HTTPS, and also the FTP and FTPS. For secure provisioning, I recommend to use HTTPS because of the encryption provided with that. You can also add other layers of security. So when you configure the config file, or you create the config file, and then you place it in your HTTP or HTTP server, excuse me, you have the option to configure the username, to restrict access to that config file with a username and a password. And then the username and password that you use to restrict access to the file, you can actually include them in the in this page under the HTTPS username and password. There's also another option where you can encrypt the XML file. If you want to have like higher level of security, you can also do that. And the way it works, so when you create the XML config file, you need to encrypt it using the OpenSSL. And when you do the encryption using OpenSSL, it's going to ask you for a secret password. And that's the secret password that's going to be used as a key to encrypt the config file. So when you do that, make sure you enter the same password that was used to encrypt the config file and include it under the setting XML config file password. And then you can take the encrypted file and place it in your HTTPS server. This way, when the phone will request the config file, the phone will receive it encrypted, and it's going to use the secret password to decrypt the config file. There's also another option. This one is available on the GXP2100 and GXP1600, which is the secure LDAP. So in case you have multiple phones deployed different places and you have an LDAP server, let's say you have an Active Directory somewhere in the main headquarters, and the phones, they usually access the contact directory in the server. If you want to add another layer of security, you can configure the secure LDAP, which encrypts all the information between the GXP phone and the LDAP server. So this is another option that you can enable on the phones if you want to add more security. And when it comes to the privacy of calls, the GXP phones, as the rest of the Grandstream IP devices, we support encrypted SIP for signaling, and also the encrypted what we call SRTP, or secure RTP, for encrypted media. For SIP, we use SIP over TLS. So different devices use different versions of TLS. So this is in case you would like to encrypt the information so you can provide another level of security and to protect your communication against eavesdropping. You can go ahead and enable SIP. For SRTP or RTP, just general idea, general information, RTP is the protocol that is used to encrypt the communication audio between the SIP or the VoIP devices. So if you would like to encrypt that information, you can enable SRTP. And when you do that, you have to choose between which key you want to use. So we have the advanced encryption system, 128-bit, and then we have the AES 256 bits. Of course, the 256 bits provides more security, but at the same time, when you enable it, that takes more resources from the phone to run the algorithm for the 256 bit. So when you want to decide which one of these to choose, you have to take into consideration those I would say those intensive resources that will be taken with a longer key like the 256. Secure VoIP services. So this is one of the common issues that a lot of users, they usually experience with their phones, regardless whether it's a Grandstream phone or third-party phone, which is ghost calls. And ghost calls, basically, they are the result of someone scanning your network. So when the phone receives an invite, it's going to ring automatically. So this is like the standard, this is the normal behavior. But if your phone keeps receiving a lot of ghost calls, or what they call phantom calls sometimes, the GXP phones, all of them, they have some settings that you can enable so that the phone can protect against those ghost calls. And the two settings in question are the ones that are set to yes in front of you. The first one is to check SIP user ID for incoming invite, and the second one is accept incoming SIP from proxy only. There are some other settings, but I would recommend to enable them only when your SIP server supports them. For example, the last option that says authenticate incoming invite, if you set that one to yes, what happens when the SIP server sends the call to the phone will challenge the SIP server for authentication. And if your SIP server doesn't allow that, the call will not be completed. With the UCM, we do support this option, so we give the phone the option to authenticate the server as well. But just be careful when you implement these two options. If you enable these two settings that I'm showing you right there, you would be able to protect your phone against ghost calls. And the second option in the secure VoIP services is the dial plan manipulation. So the GXP phones, they support dial plan manipulation, and you support 5 modes. You can include the dial now, you can include the numbers that you would like to block users from dialing. You can add prefixes. For example, when you deploy an IP phone in an environment and the users are used to dialing 7 digits when they call local numbers, you can keep that convenience for the users, and you can just go to the phone and you can tell it every time someone dials 7 digits, you can prepend like the local area code so that the phone can sense it as a 10 digits or 11 digits. Because a SIP, when we talk about SIP, very, very rare like carriers that supports 7 digits. So most of the time you're going to have to send either 10 digits or 11 digits. The GXP phones also, they support the option to control the keypad menu. Sometimes you deploy a phone in a place where you just want people to use it to dial emergency numbers or to make phone calls to local numbers. You can do that in combination with other security features like a dial plan, or you can just go to the phone and you lock the keypad, and then there's an option right there in the screenshot in front of us. The keypad lock type, you can use the functional keys and you can enable the emergency number. For example, I have 911. So when you do that, you basically lock every setting on the phone, and users will be able to call only 911 from the phone. So this is a nice option to have in case you have this phone implemented only for emergency calls. You can do that using the keypad menu control. So earlier I mentioned that the GXP2100 series will support Bluetooth on that feature. And in case you are deploying these phones in an environment where the use of Bluetooth is restricted, you can always log in as an admin and you can disable that option from the web interface, so that users who tries to let's say pair Bluetooth headset with the GXP phone, it's not going to work. Or in case they want to use a hands-free option, it's not going to work because the Bluetooth setting will not be available on their phones. There's also the option, because all the phones, as I mentioned, they are dual switch, which means they come with two ports, the LAN port and the PC port. So if you would like to disable the PC port on the GXP phone, and this is something that I would recommend, if you're not using any device connected to any phone, it's always recommended to disable the PC port so that other people cannot use that port to connect to your network. By default, the PC port is enabled on the GXP phones. If you would like to disable it, just log into to the interface of the phone and you can go to PC port and set that one to disable. So this option, the PC port mode, is available under the network setting from the web interface of the phone. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and have a quick live demo. Oops. All right. So one of the things that we talked about is securing the signaling on the phone. If you want to do that, you have to make sure that the SIP server supports secure SIP before you go to the phone and make these changes. So if you would like to encrypt the signaling, you just select the account and then you go to SIP settings, basic settings, and you check the transport mode for SIP. By default, it's UDP, plain text. If you want to encrypt it using TLS, choose TLS TCP, then save and apply the changes. Again, you can only do this if your SIP server supports the secure SIP. Next, we talked about encrypting the audio communication on the GXP phones. So by default, the phones, they use the RTP, which is a plain text, something that you can capture on the wire and then you can play it back and listen to all the audio communication. If you would like to decrypt this communication, you have two options here. There's enable but not force, and there's also enabled and force. So when you choose enabled and force, that means this phone will only talk to other devices that support SRTP or secure RTP. If a device that does not support this mode tries to call this phone, it's not going to work. The call will just drop. The second option that you have is you can enable it but not force it. In other words, if this phone receives a call from a phone that supports SRTP, it's going to prioritize it and use SRTP. But if there is another phone that doesn't support SRTP that tries to call this phone, the call will still go through and this phone would use the plain text RTP instead of SRTP. So when you enable the SRTP, these are the two options that I was talking about earlier. So we support the 128-bit and 256-bit. If like for example, if the audio communication is really important, you want to make it as secure as possible, you can choose the 256 because it's more secure. However, when you do that, let's say for example this is a 2140 and you enable SRTP and you use the key 256 and you have like 80 BLFs and so many things going on the phone, that's going to eat up a lot of resources from your phone. This applies not only to Grandstream phones, to any other third-party phones. the more secure or the longer the key, the more resources it will take to run the algorithm for the key to encrypt the traffic. So this is concerning securing your communication calls. So next we're going to move to the security features available on the GXP phone. We talked about the keypad menu control. You can control that. You have 3 modes that you can choose from. You can choose basic settings only, so that users will not have access to other options like factory reset and some advanced options. Or you can choose the constraint mode. The constraint mode will allow the users to make calls and have access to all the key call functionalities, but they will not be able to access the menu of the phone, like access the settings and make changes to those kind of things. Then you have the locked mode. So when you choose locked mode, the phone is actually locked. It will only be able to receive calls, and you can't use the keypad at all. So as I mentioned earlier, so this is a choice that you need to make. If you only have a phone that is receiving calls and you don't want anyone to abuse using that phone, you can set it to lock modes and you're ready to go. For the web access, I'm using HTTPS. By default, it's set to HTTP. I'm using port 443 for HTTPS. You can always change that one, especially when you try to access the phones remotely. You can change a different port, 8, 443, or any other ports. Then you have the option with the trusted certificates. You can upload them in here, because there are some options here, like the I've seen an option here. Yes, right here, validate server certificates. So these are for TLS, which means only valid CA certificates will be able to access and talk to this phone. If you want to enable that one, just make sure you upload your own CA certificate to the phone so that the phone can use them to validate the connection from the other devices. So these are the ones, the setting that I talked about today in the presentation. You can enable the keypad lock-in, and you can choose the functional mode, and for emergency you can include the numbers that you want to set for emergency, like 911. You can also configure the phone with a password to unlock it when it is in a locked mode. So only the admin can go to the phone and use the password to unlock it. All right, so next we move to, quickly, I'm going to move to the OpenVPN settings so I can show you how you configure this phone to connect remotely to a SIP server using OpenVPN connection. So of course, the first thing you need to do is enable the OpenVPN, and then include the public IP address of your OpenVPN server, and you can change the port that is used by the server. This is the default port used by most OpenVPN servers. Most of them, they change the port. So if that port's changed, you need to change it on the phone as well. If you are using UDP or TCP, so all the configuration that you make on the phone, they need to match the ones that are configured on the OpenVPN server. And then you take the certificates that you downloaded from the OpenVPN server, and you just upload them to the phone, and you can choose which key or which cipher is being used by the OpenVPN server. This is optional. If you want to add more security and your OpenVPN server supports it, you can include the username and password as well. So once you save and apply and you want to check that the configuration actually works, you need to go to status, network status, and check the OpenVPN IP, because I don't have any connection. Now it's blank. But if the connection is successful, the phone is supposed to get an IP address here from the OpenVPN network IP network address. So once you do that and you want to go ahead and create a SIP account that is going to register through the OpenVPN, enter the information like the extension, then under the SIP server, you're going to put the local IP of the IP PBX. So for example, if the IP PBX is behind the OpenVPN server and it's using 192.168.22.90, that's the IP that you need to include in that box. And when you do that, save and apply, then you go back to network settings and you make sure you set that one to VPN, then save and apply. So there are only 3 steps. Upload the certificates and configure the OpenVPN configuration. Set this option, the NAT traversal to VPN, and under general settings, SIP server, make sure you include the private IP address used by the IP PBX. So I believe that's it for this presentation. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A section. We still have a few more minutes to address your questions in case you have some.
Okay, looks like we got someone popping in with a question here. I'm just waiting for him to finish typing it. Okay, so question here, Abdel, is first, firmware is constantly coming out and it is a bit buggy at times, so I steer away from trying to always update. What is the firmware that is suggested to get all of these security settings capable?
I mean, the official firmware has all these options, and for this phone, I'm running the beta version. So all the features that we talked about today, they're available on the official firmware version. When you say it's a bit buggy at times, I'm not sure exactly what bugs you are referring to. I mean, every device, regardless whether it's a Grandstream or not, they always come with bugs, and this is something that we discover down the road, especially when you deploy the phone in a large deployment, and that's when you start noticing issues that customers they report. But I believe the latest official firmware is stable. So you should be good if you want to install that one and have access to all these features.
So yeah, he followed up with, is there a stable non-beta version that you can access all of these settings? So that would be the latest firmware update that came out, right, Abdel?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. The latest official firmware version has all these options.
Okay, is there any other questions out there? We got a couple minutes here. Be happy to answer anything you got. Okay, looks like Eric has another question here. So Eric's question is, I guess, related to a password bug. He said he did an update to the site with 107 GXP21XX phones, and when it asked for a password change, he changed, but then it locked him out of the phone. It would ask for a password change every time, and he couldn't get around it.
I mean, Eric, I've seen this question, but it's not related to the phone bug. This is something that could be related to your web browser cache. Sometimes you change the password, you try to log in again, then the password that you just changed doesn't work. For this case, I would suggest you try with a different browser, or just clear the browser cache and try again, or you can use a different computer in case you want to avoid the cache issue on the phones.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Abdel. And I do thank everybody for coming into the webinar today that is here. I hope everything was informative and helpful to you. I'd like to thank Abdel from Grandstream for giving us his time and professional knowledge on the product to be able to walk us through some of the finer points of Grandstream's feature set, specifically regarding the security features. And if there's no more questions or whatnot, I guess we'll wrap this up.
All right, thanks, Tom, and thanks everyone again for attending this webinar. Have a good one.